Hello friends, in this article today I'm going to discuss with you the trend of India's GDP growth rate, why it has been slowing down and what are the kind of steps that India can take to combat this slowdown. My name is Avinash Agarwal. I welcome you all to my channel Everyday Economics. Let us start with our discussion. So recently the news came out on December 7, 2022 that RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das has increased the repo rate to control inflation in India. So now the repo rate has been increased up to 6.25%, and this kind of a hike or this kind of an increase was expected. Most people were of the opinion that yes, this hike is required to control prices in India, right, to control inflation in India. The idea is that RBI also reduced India's GDP growth projection for the financial year 22-23, right? So in September 2022, the projection given by RBI was that of 7%, and that has been reduced to 6.8%. This number of 7% in September was actually 7.2% in April, right? So you can see that there is a declining trend from 7.2% to 7% to 6.8%. There are various challenges in front of India, right? Of course, there is geopolitical disturbance related to Russia-Ukraine war, right? There are also other issues that we'll be discussing in this lecture. Now, if you see what has been happening to India's GDP growth rate of late, so you will see that the number for GDP growth rate was 13.5% in the quarter 1 for financial year 23. It was 8.4% in quarter 2, and it came down to 6.3%. Right, so you can see that what we are having is a declining trend. Nobody can deny that. Numbers are what they are, right? Now everybody has expected this to happen, so nobody is panicked about it. The gross value added is slightly less than India's GDP, which is fine, because gross value added plus taxes is equals to GDP, right? So this is a formula that you have to keep in mind, right? Broadly speaking, gross value added plus taxes is equals to GDP. So the fact that GDP of India, the growth figure for GDP of India was 70 basis point higher than GVA, right? So 0.7% higher is the growth rate, right? So the idea over here is that if the GDP is more than the GVA, that means that there is good amount of tax collection that is happening, right? And if tax collection is happening, then many believe that that is quite good, right? If the tax collection is happening, that means that people are having income, people are having profits, companies are having profits, people are having income, people are undertaking transactions, so they are paying GST, etc., right? So the fact that people are paying taxes, that's a good thing. That shows that the recovery is happening on an okay front, right? Apart from that, if you look at what the other rating agencies have been doing, other financial institutions have been doing, so there is an avalanche of GDP forecast cuts. So everybody has been reducing India's GDP forecast for the financial year 22-23. Now this trend started in September 1. SKG, that is Soumya Kanti Ghosh of State Bank of India, he reduced the forecast for India's GDP growth for FY23, right, by a significant 0.7%. So the earlier forecast given by SKG was 7.5%, reduced to 6.8%, keeping in mind the kind of headwinds and challenges that we were facing. Other financial institutions followed suit, and they also downgraded India's GDP growth forecast, citing the slowdown in the manufacturing sector, external risks, as well as inflation as the primary reason for reducing the forecast. The idea that you need to keep in mind is that there can be an exception, right? There is no iron law that says that, okay, this has to happen. Like, for example, if you go by ICRA ka projection, they are saying that India's GDP growth rate should be 7.2%. So somebody asked Aditi Nair, who is the chief economist at ICRA, that why do you believe that 7.2% should be the growth rate? Why are you having a higher projection? So her idea is that, the forecast that she was having in mind for quarter 1, right? So for quarter 1, she was having a forecast of 13%, right? And the growth rate actually reported by the economy was close to her forecast, right? So she does believe that downside risks are there, right? But in India's case, merchandise exports have been revised upwards. So we are expecting that in the last quarter, that is in January, February and March, right, we are having a good forecast for merchandise exports, which is a good thing. Keeping that in mind, and also keeping in mind that the festival demand was quite robust and that consumer spending was quite robust, she is of the opinion that 7.2% is achievable. That's about FY23. If we look at the next financial year, so the GDP forecasts are gloomier. That is not true only for India, but also globally. We are expecting the global economy to be in a recession. So CRISIL is expecting India to have a 6% GDP growth rate. IMF is having a 6.1% projection, right? Other agencies are also having similar projections. Why is that, you may ask? So the reason is that the monetary policy transmission. So we have been hiking the interest rate. We have been making loans costlier in India. So that will obviously put a dent on consumer spending, on investment spending. So the idea is that because of hiking the interest rate, the GDP or the demand scenario should face a downward push. Because of that happening in FY24, most agencies are expecting slow growth rate in India's GDP as compared to whatever we are happening right now, right? So obviously we need to sort of take care of growth. There is no need to avoid growth sacrifice, or there is no need to avoid growth or undertake growth sacrifice. The idea is that if prices come back under control, then we can start focusing upon growth. So to control prices, we can increase the interest rate, but the moment prices are controlled, right? So we should start nurturing growth by moderating the interest rates as soon as possible. If you look at Goldman Sachs prediction, they are saying that in the calendar year 2023, India will grow at 5.9%, right? And that is exactly 1% slower than whatever happened in the last year as per Goldman Sachs, right? Again, speaking about the next year, right? Next year. So the next year is expected to be basically divided into two halves, right? So in the first half, we will have a slowdown, right? First half, we will have a slowdown for two reasons. First reason is that, this year we were having a very good first quarter and second quarter. So next year, even if we have a okay first quarter and second quarter, so that will basically reflect as, let us say, a moderate growth and not a high growth. And second of all the monetary tightening or the increase in repo rate that we have done right now in the last 6-7 months, that will have an impact, right? So that is the story of the first half. When we come to the second half, we see that we will be able to have an accelerated growth rate, right? Because the idea is that the global growth will come back on track, or should come back on track, right? And exports should pick up. Investment cycle should therefore also pick up, right? Another very important factor to watch next year will be the rupee versus the dollar scenario, right? So again, here some set of economists believe that the performance of rupee will be good next year. It will stabilize next year, right? And all of those good things will happen. So rupee will no longer depreciate, right? So there is Dharma Kirti Joshi of CRISIL, who believe that the rupee will appreciate to 79.5, then appreciate further to 79.5, right, in 2023, right? The idea over here is that when the rupee does not depreciate too much, that will be very good, right? So India's import bill will come under control. India's current account deficit will also come under control, right? So when the import bill is coming under control, the net result will be that all the imported inflation that we are having, right? We are buying expensive items from abroad, which is causing prices to increase in India. That is called imported inflation. So this imported inflation will sort of come under control, and as a result of that, the domestic inflation situation should improve, right? And if the domestic situation improves so far as inflation is concerned, if the domestic situation improves so far as exchange rate is concerned, and if the RBI is able to moderate the interest rates or the repo rate, right? So that basically is a good scenario, right? So you can have consumption demand coming back on track, and the investment demand also coming back on track. That is what Dharma Kirti Joshi of CRISIL is saying, right? So that's a very optimistic way of looking at things, right? Of course, there can also be a slightly more pessimistic way of looking at things, or a more gloomier way of looking at things. So if you go by what Goldman Sachs believe, so they believe that the rupee will depreciate to 84 in 84 rupees per dollar in 3 months, right? It will stabilize at 82. So while Dharmakirti Joshi is expecting an appreciation, Goldman Sachs is expecting rupee to stay where it is or to depreciate. But nevertheless, Goldman Sachs does not believe that this depreciation will be too harmful for India. They still believe that a lot of FDI, a lot of FPI will keep coming into India, for the simple reason that India is an attractive opportunity to invest and India's long-term forecasts are okay, right? So if the question that is asked to you, that how can we sort of keep the global growth on track in the financial year 2024? So the idea that needs to be kept in mind is that there are basically four engines for growth. So there is a consumption engine, there is an investment engine, there is a government expenditure engine, and there is an export engine. So consumption engine is still quite nascent, right? And private sector investments are still facing headwinds. In such a scenario, Dharmakirti Joshi believes that government spending, and particularly government spending on infrastructural assets or capital expenditure, will be the way forward, and that is done by the government. So the Indian economy should be able to do well, right? So we can't afford to be complacent. We can't afford to be arrogant. Yes, we are going to have a 6.8% growth rate in FY23, and given the fact that we are the fifth largest economy, right, and we are growing at 6.8%, which is not bad at all. We are the fastest growing economy, but there's no point being complacent about it, right? We need to watch out. We need to figure in global slowdown. We need to figure in geopolitical issues, and we need to take steps so that we can nurture the growth momentum. So the idea is that we need to be on guard. We need to make sure that this growth engine, which has been slowing down quarter after quarter after quarter, is taken care of. And if we end with a good news, the good news is that the World Bank has actually raised the forecast for India to 6.9%, right, for this particular year. So while the world believes that there is a decline, ICRA as well as World Bank believe that there is a possibility that we may do better than what we are projecting, right? So will the World Bank and ICRA projections hold true, or will other projections hold true? Only time will tell, but of course efforts need to be taken in the right direction to steer the economy towards a better future. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. Thank you very much. All the very best, and Jai Hind to you.